Chag Chanukah Sameach. Happy Hanukkah to all members of the extended March of a Living family, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual Chanukah Journey through Israel with educator Julian Resnick. Since its inception in 1988, the International March of a Living has proudly brought over 275,000 students and adults, both Jewish and non-Jewish, from over 40 countries around the globe to Poland and Israel on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day. The work of the International March of a Living has had a tremendous impact on its participants and serves as a call to action for them to fight for a future free of anti-Semitism, racism, hatred, bigotry, and intolerance in all its forms. While we all continue to navigate this ever-changing landscape we find ourselves in, the International March of a Living remains dedicated to educating about the horrors of the past in order to ensure a better future. You're all in for a real treat today as Julian takes us on a whirlwind tour of Israel through the lens of Hanukkah. Julian was born in South Africa and made Aliyah to Israel in 1976. He is a proud member of Kibbutz Tzora, where he lives with his wife, children, and 6 grandchildren. He has been an educator for all of his adult life and has served 3 Shlichuyot to London, San Francisco, and New York City. Julian has been an educator in Poland for the March of a Living many times, including for our Australian March of a Living delegation. He is also the creator of the Journeys Making Meaning initiative. Before turning the floor over to Julian, I remind all of you to tune in to future March of a Living webinars and to keep track by visiting our website, motl.org, and following us on our various social media platforms. In the meantime, I wish all of you a Chag Chanukah Sameach. May it be filled with light, surprises, and miracles for you, your family, the Jewish people, and the world entire. Shalom.
Hi everyone, Shalom Lekulam. My name is Julian Resnick, and you've decided to come on a tiyul with me, on a trip with me, on a journey with me. This is a special journey because this journey takes you through Israel, through the land of Israel, through the state of Israel, my home, to talk a little bit about Hanukkah. This is your Hanukkah tiyul this year. Now, I know you're going to light your candles and you're going to spin your dreidels and you're going to eat your sufganiyot. I've forgotten what they're called in English, but you know what I mean. And this year you're also going to do a tiyul with me. In a way, Hanukkah is the quintessential Jewish holiday. We decide and have decided over the centuries what the essential meaning is of Hanukkah, if of course there is an essential meaning. What I'm going to do with you on our tiyul today is I'm going to take you around Israel, just to a couple of places. And if you look carefully now, if you look really carefully in the top of this frame, you might be able to guess where we are. Of course, I'm standing right in front of an olive tree, which is the perfect tree to stand in front of for Hanukkah. But behind me, in the top of the frame, you can just probably see something that you'll recognize, especially if you've been to Jerusalem before. It's the David Citadel. It's the citadel named after King David. We are going to start in Jerusalem and then continue in other parts of the country to try and ask the question, what is the meaning of Hanukkah? Is there an eternal meaning? Or is it something we make up for ourselves? I want to just read a little piece for you. From the Chalutzim, the pioneers returning to the land of Israel at the end of the 19th century and looking for Jewish heroes of the Muscular time, to Adam Sandler on Saturday Night Live singing, "Put on your yarmulke, here comes Hanukkah, so much fun-akah to celebrate Hanukkah." So let's go and have some fun-akah and some serious stuff as well. So the truth is, I wasn't going to film over here. But as we were walking along, Orly, my wife, said to me, she does the filming by the way, thank you Orly, said to me, this is a great place to stop. And I thought, as I was standing here, isn't it extraordinary? Maybe it's a miracle that she said this is a great place to stop, because over here, right in this place, one of my own miracles during all my years in Israel happened over here. Of course, this is a tiyul which in some ways about miracles. Just after Natan Sharansky was released from being a prisoner of Zion in Russia. I was walking along over here, hurrying to see a group, and who do I bump into? Natan and Avital Sharansky. So when you live in Israel for a long time, as I have, you do find places that are connected to your own miracle moments. And for me, this is one of them. Scene one, the opening of the tiyul. Not where we were previously, but over here. Why over here and not, you might ask, in the kotel, which is just maybe 50 meters from where I'm standing? Partly because of the noise you hear in the background. It's Monday morning, it's bar mitzvah time, and the kotel is an overwhelming place and not really a place where I can talk. But also partly because if you were to say to me, Julian, where's the one place that I have to go to when I visit Israel? Not only on Hanukkah, on Pesach, on Sukkot, on any day of the year, I would say the one place that I do not want you to miss is the Davidson Center. I'm going to try and explain why. I need to show you something just so that you have this in your mind when we head up to the Temple Mount. I hope you can read what is written on that rock. You're going to hold the camera there for a moment. Basically, the first two words are the crucial ones over here. The first two words are lebeit hatkiya. Now, even if your Hebrew is not great, you probably can work out the first word. Lebeit, to the house of. Hatkiya, let me just help you if you're struggling. Tkiya, okay? Ring a bell? Reminds you of the blowing of the shofar. It's the place of the blowing of the shofar. Now, why am I taking you here before I take you up on the Temple Mount? Because the Temple Mount, the decision has been made by UNESCO that there is no Temple Mount in the nomenclature. The only term that is used, according to the International United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, is Haram el-Sharif, the word that they use in Arabic, the Muslims use to denote the crucial nature of the place to them. They say, what is the evidence of Jews being there in the ancient world? This, folks, this over here that Orly is showing you again, this is the evidence. This is over 2,000 years old. This used to be up on the wall behind and actually fell down when the rest of this rubble fell down. Remember when? You remember it was on the 9th day of Av in the year 70. So we start over here because clearly one of the questions that we are going to be dealing with today is, what is the history? What is the big story over here? Now, we've mentioned it already. It's the story of an uprising. Jewish people deciding that we're not going to just live with a situation that we're uncomfortable with. How did we respond? Who were the people involved? You all know the story. But before we head off to tell more of the story, I just have to take you to one other place in this magnificent archaeological garden. So in the Davidson Center, this is actually the place that I really love coming to. And I say, when anybody says to me, where do we have to go to? I always say the southern steps. Now, most of you have been here before, I know that. All of you who watched that wonderful webinar that Asaf Boker did previously on Sukkot for the March of the Living International were over here with him. Really, really a wonderful webinar. I came here in spite of the fact that Asaf brought you over here. I came here because there is something that I want to say over here. I'm going to dedicate a candle over here. And the candle is going to be dedicated to two things, to memory and to empathy. What is memory? It's not history. It's those things that we remember. It's those things that we have deep down inside of us, even when we're usually not aware that they are in us. No matter what type of a Jew you are, no matter how you practice your Judaism, there are certain moments in our past that clearly have formed who you are. How do we recognize those moments? Just watch this video and maybe you'll understand yourself.
Shir Lamalot Esana שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם ישמורך, השם צילך על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר המעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם שומרך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם.
Wow. I'm not sure about you folks, but whenever I watch that, a thrill goes through my body. Now, before the song, I did mention that I was going to talk not only about memory, but also about empathy. I'm going to talk about empathy because there are in the southern steps, I'm not there at the moment, as I'm sure you've picked up, there are also the Hulda gates. The Hulda gates were the gates through which the pilgrims went up to the temple on the pilgrimage festivals. All of the pilgrims went in one set of gates and came out another set of gates, except for one group of people. The people who went in the out gates and came out the in gates were people in mourning. Folks, that's all about empathy. Why did they do it the other way around? So that people would notice them and would be able to wish them long life, would notice them and be aware that even though they were going up to the temple for a moment of incredible joy, to make a sacrifice, there were people with them who were in pain. Why empathy? Why is it so important for me? Because I believe that Israel is the apex of the Jewish experience, of thousands of years of Jewish culture. And we have to be the best possible place we can be, and that is only possible if we are an empathic society. Notice the signs, folks, as we begin to walk along the bridge that connects the area near the Kotel with the Temple Mount. Look below you now and you will see people davening at the Western Wall. We're headed up for the Temple Mount, something most tourists never do. So I want to continue on this spot. We introduced the big story. We talked about the historical moment, and I thought it would be a great idea to bring you up onto the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, known by the Muslims of Haram al-Sharif, the holy sanctuary, is a place that is considered to be holy to a number of faith groups. Us, the Jewish people, the Muslims, and even the Christians, of course, have a connection over here via the Old Testament. The question of how we behave over here on the Temple Mount is a fascinating one. I'm not sure how many of you have been here because Jewish groups tend not to come up over here. The only people who are allowed to pray on the Temple Mount are the Muslims. Christians and Jews are not allowed to pray over here. Who made that crazy decision, you might say? You might have jumped out of your chairs in Los Angeles, in Melbourne, in Cape Town, Johannesburg, in London, and said, who made that terrible decision? I want to tell you who it was. It was the Supreme Court of the State of Israel. If you want to understand why, let's just walk around the Temple Mount for a few moments, and then I'll explain why that decision was made. We're going to just have a little bit of a view of things as we walk around. I'm standing in front of a place with beautiful, beautiful remains from 2,000 years ago. And then we are going to walk in front of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, and I'll speak in those two places as well. We all know that the temple was desecrated. There were terrible rules set in place by Antiochus. So this is the area of where the temple stood. Now, right behind me, what you're seeing at the moment is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a mosque built in the 11th century. Of course, there's a question we have to ask. If what Antiochus and the Seleucid Greeks did desecrated the temple, is there a desecration going on today by the fact that it stands over here? And of course, the question that comes afterwards, what should we do? If there is a desecration, how should we act? Let's think about those questions as we walk over to the area of the Dome of the Rock. So folks, I owe you an explanation why the Supreme Court of the State of Israel made the decision that only Muslims could pray on the Temple Mount. And the answer is quite simple. The Supreme Court of Israel says all people have an inalienable right to pray wherever they wish. However, the court is not only responsible for maintaining the inalienable right of all people to pray wherever they wish, it is also responsible for maintaining law and order. And the court decided that the only way to maintain law and order on the Temple Mount at this point in history was to limit prayer to Muslims only. It's sometimes hard to understand why we should do it. And I think the answer is that when you are the sovereign, you not only have to be correct, you have to be clever. And I think that that is what the Supreme Court of the State of Israel has done. The Supreme Court of the State of Israel has made a clever decision for the good of all of its citizens, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. So as we leave the Temple Mount, I'm going to suggest that we dedicate one of the 8 Hanukkah candles over here. And we are going to dedicate this candle to history. And in a way, we are going to assume that the story we tell ourselves really happened. Later on, we might ask certain questions as to the authenticity of parts of the story and what really happened. Little Hasidic children running around in the old city of Jerusalem. What value might this candle then be? So the answer to this is as follows. You are, over the next 2 minutes or so, going to see a number of scenes which represent very, very different parts of who we are in Israel. And this candle is dedicated to diversity. Now, I have to say one thing about diversity as we watch what is going on in the background. It is all very well to turn around to the ultra-Orthodox community and say to them, you have to be more accepting. You have to be able to understand that part of being Jewish for some people today is the extreme that we see in the video behind me now in Tel Aviv. We cannot ask that of the ultra-Orthodox community if we are not prepared to do the same for them. Diversity works in both ways. Diversity means that the Jews of Tel Aviv, who might be celebrating gay pride in June, have to understand that it is equally valid for the Jews in Mea Shearim to celebrate in a very different way. Diversity, if it doesn't work in both directions, is not diversity at all. This candle is dedicated to diversity in the State of Israel, to accepting those who are different from us and finding ways to live together in the Jewish state. Try an experiment the next time you come to Israel. I'm sure you have Waze on your phone. Put into Waze Kivrot HaMaccabim, the graves of the Maccabim, and just follow whatever directions you are given. If you're leaving from Jerusalem, you'll leave on the 443, you'll drive for about half an hour, you turn off at a particular sign, one of those brown signs that lead you to tourist sites in Israel, and after a short walk, you'll arrive at a very, very ordinary looking site with a few ancient graves dug into the ground, and let me tell you, you'll be alone. There'll be nobody else over here because nobody comes here. Nobody comes to what is being called the graves of the Maccabim. Are these the graves of the Maccabim? To be honest, probably not. So when did they become known as the graves of the Maccabim? So in 1907 we are told that the Herzliya Gymnasia in Tel Aviv, the first Hebrew high school in Tel Aviv, does a day trip. The intrepid teacher, Mar Bograshov, Mr. Bograshov, most of us only know that as the name of a street in Tel Aviv today, takes them to this place. They stumble across the graves, and Mr. Bograshov, in his effort to try and connect the young people to the great stories of the Jewish people, makes a decision. He says, young men, young women, these are the graves of the Maccabim. Now, the candle over here that we are going to light is going to be dedicated to the notion of continuity. How do you, if you are an educator, if you care about our story, how do you continue the story? How do you get it from thousands of years ago through until today? I want to read you, just for a moment, something from First Maccabim, to try and unpack just for a moment who these people were. Then lawless men came forth from Israel and misled many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles around us. They built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom and removed the marks of circumcision and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. Now these lawless men were not Seleucid Greeks. They were Jews who had in some way taken on Hellenistic culture. Hellenistic culture, by the way, really, some of the wonderful parts of world culture at the time are what we called Hellenistic culture. Language, literature, art, philosophy. If you are a cultured person watching this, and I'm going to assume that you are, otherwise, why would you watch something of March of the Living International, which is all for cultured people? I'm going to guess that it doesn't make you angry to hear the words art, literature, language, philosophy. However, of course, there were other elements to this Hellenistic culture which are probably less acceptable to you. Now, I want to read you just how this continues because it's fascinating. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and lawless men in their wrath. The survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. Who did the Maccabees attack? They attacked other Jews initially, the Jews who actually lived a different lifestyle from the one that they had chosen. Now, if you look at it this way, the Maccabim were perhaps not heroic liberators and defenders of religious freedom. You might actually look at them as intolerant, as religious zealots, attempting to stamp out anything that they did not like. The question is, what is Jewish and what is not? Who decides what our Judaism looked like at any point? And then, of course, does it not have to be Judaism that works for people? But on the other hand, if we modernize ourselves to the extent that we don't recognize who we are, where we came from, what is left of us? Now, the story of the Maccabees and their revolt against the Greek rulers really was a central theme that continues through Jewish history. From this period before the Common Era, right through until the 20th century. Another story that we all are told, the story of Masada, disappears, for example. It disappears because of the real difficult question of suicide. But the story of the Maccabees, this family, this Hasmonean family, these brothers that lead a revolt against the Seleucid Greeks, continues. So much so, by the way, that one of the most important pieces of poetry ever written by a Jewish poet, The City of Slaughter, written by Chaim Nachman Bialik after the pogrom in Kishinev in 1903, contains the following lines. Come now, and I will bring thee to their lairs, the privies, jakes, and pig pens, where the heirs of Hasmoneans lay with trembling knees, concealed and cowering, the sons of the Maccabees. Why is the story so important for us? The story is so important for us because one of the central themes of Jewish history is the question of power and powerlessness. What happens to us when we are powerless? When we are the objects of history? When the Cossacks can decide how to relate to us? And then later, when other misfortunes are visited upon us? Contrarily, what happens when we have power? How do we behave? How do we actually defend ourselves? When you come to the site of the graves of the Maccabees, you will see something interesting. You'll walk just 50 meters, as we are going to do now, and you'll see a modern element to this site, which was added in a number of years ago by the State of Israel. The awful pogrom that Bialik described in his poem, The City of Slaughter, that I just read just a couple of lines from, is not the worst thing that happens to the Jewish people, as we all know, in the 20th century. But at some point we decide to take things into our own hands and we decide to fight for our independence. This continuity, this decision that the Jewish people are going to continue comes at a huge price. Right next to the graves of the Maccabees, just outside Modi'in, we have this memorial to soldiers from the area who died fighting for the independence of the Jewish people, fighting to move us from a situation of powerlessness to power. Just how significant the stories of the Maccabees were is clear when we read this passage to be found on a part of the memorial. The soldiers who fell in the battles of the Modi'in region during the War of Independence and members of the settlements of the region who fell during Israeli military campaigns are commemorated in this monument. A new tradition connects this location with the battles of the Maccabees. In this spirit, one of the combatants stated, "We stood before the enemy ready for day battles and night raids. We tricked him with battle tactics and seized his vehicle. In the native land of the Maccabees, Modi'in, the Jordanian soldiers learned what Maccabee heroism was. According to the book of the Maccabees, Shimon set up 7 pyramids on the graves of his family, for his father Matityahu the Kohen, for his mother, for his 4 brothers killed in battles, Elazar, Yehuda, Yochanan, and Yonatan, and another gravestone for his own grave." We dedicate the candle here to the struggle for continuity of the Jewish people. When I was growing up in South Africa, it was a Jewish community with very, very few survivors. My father's sister married a survivor, but he was the only survivor that I knew. And until I came to live in Israel, I really lived in a Jewish community in which the Holocaust, of course, had a role, but it wasn't front center. Once I moved to Israel, and when I went to work afterwards at some point in England and in the United States of America, the place of Holocaust survivors really became much more significant in the communities that I was a part of. I want to dedicate this candle to those of our brothers and sisters who perished in the Shoah, as well as those who survived. Walk with me to the main square of Yad Vashem. So we walked along the Avenue of the Righteous amongst the nations to the main square in Yad Vashem, the National Memorial and Museum to the Holocaust of the State of Israel. When I was working in England as a shaliach for the State of Israel, I met a Holocaust survivor who made a huge, huge impression upon me, Rabbi Hugo Gryn. Rabbi Hugo Gryn tells an extraordinary story connected to Hanukkah, and I'm going to read you something written by Rabbi David Wolpe of Temple Sinai in Los Angeles. I have known many people, Holocaust survivors, refugees who fled oppression, people plagued with illness, and others to whom life has dealt cruel blows. Some of them lost everything and had to begin again. Despite many reasons to despair, in a crucial turn toward the future, resilient spirits choose renewed hope and rededicated themselves to purposeful living. That Hanukkah moment is the inspiration we all need. Everyone fails in ways large and small and needs the strength to rise anew. Hanukkah is a winter holiday. It shines light in the darkest time of the year. Each night we add another light, increasing until the entire Hanukkah menorah is illuminated. The late Rabbi Hugo Gryn was a child in Auschwitz. The holiday of Hanukkah came, and after fashioning a makeshift menorah, his father melted the precious margarine ration to light a wick for the first night. The young Hugo, outraged, protested to his father. How could he use the food which sustained them in the midst of such horror just to observe the holiday? Many years later, Rabbi Gryn said at that moment his father spoke words he never forgot. His father said, "My child, we know you can live 3 days without water. You can live 3 weeks without food, but you cannot live for 3 minutes without hope." Rabbi Gryn, Hugo, those words have stayed with me for many years now, and I dedicate this candle to you and all of our brothers and sisters who went through the horrors that you saw as a young child. I really wanted to dedicate one of the candles to home, and I brought you to a sign at the entrance to my home. I've lived on Kibbutz Tzora now for many, many years, in fact close to 35 years. Let me say it in the following way. For the first 16 years of my life, I slept in the same bed in Somerset West in South Africa, where I was born and grew up. Then for many years after that, I moved from place to place, from bed to bed. Now for the last 35 years, I've been on Kibbutz Tzora. And if you look at the sign, you'll see that for our purposes, this really fits beautifully, because my home, Kibbutz Tzora, was founded in Hanukkah 1948. Why was it founded in Hanukkah 1948? Because it was during the War of Independence and the road to Jerusalem had to be secured. So two groups of young people, one from the Palmach, fighting forces that helped create the State of Israel, and the second from Habonim, South Africa, the youth movement that I grew up in, came and settled over here and helped secure the road to Jerusalem. In their honor, we should dedicate this candle to home. But I need to show you a couple of other elements of what really makes this home. Come with me. First of all, I just wanted you to see the entrance to the kibbutz. It is really absolutely gorgeous. These things don't happen on their own. So let me just walk with you for a moment and show you that over here. Hey, Tzipa, לאן את הולכת?
תפסיקו לבלבל את המוח ותצלמו ותגידו לי למי אתם שולחים.
So this is Tzipa. She is one of the veterans of the kibbutz, and she is not happy sitting back and relaxing in her retirement years. She is responsible for the beauty that you see here. One of the wonderful things about my home is that people can continue to be active and make a contribution. And that is what Tzipa is doing. She wants you to know that she is 85 years young, and I assume she'll be doing this until 120, until she's 120. Tzipa at 120.
יש שחרור?
יש שחרור. All of our homes have certain visuals connected to them, certain sounds connected to them, certain tastes connected to them. My home also has certain smells connected to it. You are standing with me now at the refet, the cow sheds of Kibbutz Tzora. If you breathe really deeply, you can probably smell the incredible smell of my home, the smell of cow shit. Isn't it good, folks? One more place to take you on the kibbutz. So we saw the beauty of the flowers at the entrance of the kibbutz. We went over to the dairy, to the refet, to smell that wonderful kibbutz aroma. And this is the third place I wanted to bring you to. One of the children's houses on the kibbutz, one of the preschool areas. We have about half a dozen of them, where children from the age of 3 months up to 6 years spend their days from 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. The kibbutz really became a home for me when I became a grandparent. Only then did I realize what it felt like to be in a home of this type. So some of the candles are dedicated to big things, to history, to memory, to resilience, and some of them are more intimate. And this candle I'm going to dedicate to the most intimate of all, to family. I'm standing now in front of, the truth is not in front of, behind my home on Kibbutz Tzora. And the reason I choose to stand over here and not in the front of my house is because below where I live up above. Below where I live my daughter Maya, my son-in-law Ido, and 2 of the 6 grandchildren that I have here on the kibbutz, Noam and Ronnie. So I dedicate this candle to family, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you just 2 clips, not made today, but made one last Hanukkah and the other one 2 Hanukkahs ago. And I think you'll understand why it feels like such a privilege to live with my family on the kibbutz. By the way, besides Ronnie, who I'll be holding in one of the videos and who her parents will be holding in the other video, I have 4 more grandchildren on the kibbutz. You heard it, 4 more grandchildren. Within 200 yards of where I live, we have Tamar, who is 7, we have Naomi, who's 5, we have the twins, Yotam and Asaf, who will be 3. In fact, they are 3 by the time you see this video. Ronnie, who is 2 years old, and little Noam, who is 2 months old. I dedicate this candle to family. May each and every one of you enjoy your families greatly this Hanukkah. Ronnie, stop hitting me in the face. So we started with Pesach, we moved on to Rosh Hashanah, and now it's Hanukkah. And she's feeling appropriately feisty. The first Chag we were together for was Pesach, then was Rosh Hashanah, and now it's Hanukkah. So, as with the first 2 Chagim, we're going to sing something for this one as well. Banu choshech legaresh, beyadenu or va'esh, כל אחד הוא אור קטן, וכולנו אור איתן, סורה חושך הלשחור, סורה מפני האור, which translated basically means when we have put all our lights together, we're really tough and strong. And we are coming together to get rid of the darkness and bringing in the light. In a few minutes, we're going to light the last of our 8 candles on this Hanukkah tiyul. We're going to light it just down the road at the home of a fascinating person. But I thought, since we've traveled this direction, I do want to take you to one of the places that I love taking groups to see in Israel. We are approaching a monument known as Andartat HaPlada. This is a monument which was created in memory of those members of the Armored Corps who fell fighting in the 6-Day War in this part of the south of Israel. The strangest thing about this memorial is it doesn't stand where it originally was placed. This memorial was originally in the town of Yamit. After the Camp David Accords, Israel left Yamit, and we decided that we could not just abandon this memorial because of the power of the memorial and who it's named for. And therefore, the entire memorial was taken out of Yamit and recreated exactly as it looked in Yamit in this place. As we get closer to the memorial, you'll notice, of course, the memorial plaques which mention the names of each one of the soldiers who fell fighting in the Six-Day War in the south of Israel. In addition, you'll notice the pillars, and each of the pillars has a piece of metal on them. And the pillars represent the soldiers, and the piece of metal represent that part of the military that they were a part of. I find this an incredibly moving memorial, and it is, in a way, it's ironic that it was moved from Yamit, from an area that we gave back to help create peace, and now it's found right on the outskirts of Gaza, a place that we are struggling with to create peace that we really want in this area. So folks, we've traveled a long way. Luckily, you haven't moved. You've just been sitting in front of your computers and you haven't experienced the 130 kilometers that we traveled in the last part of our journey to get down to visit Yaron Bob. Why do we go all this way, you might ask? Why couldn't we just pop around the corner from where we were previously near Jerusalem? Yaron, tell us why we came over here. What is so special about you and what you do?
First of all, the sunset is very nice, but actually I live very close to the border between Gaza and Egypt. So actually it's about 1.5 miles to Gaza and 1 mile from Egypt. So we enjoying the best of both worlds, rockets and penetrations. Now, the sad thing is that almost every day we hear explosives from the Egypt side, and there is a lot of activity and a lot of we hear machine guns and explosives in the background. So this is actually our way of life, to cope with the explosives, and we cope with the alarms and all the situation that is very, very stressful here in our area.
So I see on your shirt over here you have an interesting logo. And what the logo says on your shirt is rockets to roses. And I see a blacksmith's anvil.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay, first of all, rockets. As you can see, I have all the good stuff from our neighbors. You see, so we have, this is the Qassam, okay? And this is the Grad rocket that they're firing to all the cities in the south, like Ashdod, Ashkelon, Sderot, and Be'er Sheva. Okay? So this is the Grad. Look here. We have the Zilzal rocket, and we have another kind of rocket that they are sending. See how many I have here.
And where are these manufactured, by the way?
This is actually, the Qassam rockets are manufactured self-made. Okay, they are taking irrigation pipes, sewer pipes in Gaza. The Grad rocket actually made in China. The Fajar rocket, this one that's firing towards Tel Aviv and towards Jerusalem.
Okay, just come closer. I want everybody to see the Fajar rocket.
This is the Fajar rocket, okay? This is the debris of the Fajar rocket. And this is what firing toward Tel Aviv and toward Jerusalem. Okay?
Where are they made?
From Iran.
Ah, okay.
So the ship to Iran, smuggled to Gaza, then fired upon us. Now let me show you a very nice thing. This is the Iron Dome. This is the Iron Dome interceptor that when they are launching all of these rockets, we are firing this one, it's maneuvered to the proximity of the rockets and then exploded. So it's take out in mid-air the rockets, so the debris are just falling like that.
So how do they all land up over here?
Okay,
They don't
this
fire
one
at
I
you,
need
right?
to tell you inside. Okay, come, let's go inside. I was a computer network administrator. I was an IT guy. And when I was working in the high school, one of the rockets fell very close to me. And from that situation, it's actually turned my life. And I decided to stop working as an IT guy, and I dedicated my whole life to do sculptures from the rockets, turning darkness into light. I'm getting yours. I'm working on a new sculpture. I'm going to show you and you, but not the audience. They have to come here to see. This is going to be my new thing, and it's going to be epic. Now, so I'm getting the rose. Now, the second I made this rose, I felt like a waterfall of cleaning energy that cleansed me from all the hate and the anger and the frustration. So at that point, I knew two things. First, it's better to me to work with the metal than to pay the shrink, it's a lot cheaper. Second, that I need to spread the word that we, the people of Israel, want to live in peace and harmony, and we don't want to. And whatever they throw at us, we transfer from darkness into light, from a bad thing into a good thing. Pick this one up, it's easier than two. Okay, so this is the Hanukkah. They're making from the rockets, okay?
So all of this is from rockets?
Except the big one and the circle. All the other ones are from the rockets.
So folks, you would have noticed across your screen was a link. And the link is to your online shop.
Nice.
The reason we're doing this is because I actually think probably you're sitting in your homes right now and saying, I want one of these, I need a flower, I need a Chanukiah for next year. So if you want to, just go to the link, click on the link and get yourself something beautiful. All the way from your own bub, right next to the border with Gaza. So our journey has come to an end. I wouldn't say we've done the length and breadth of Israel, but I think we've traveled around a lot, dedicated our candles, and I wanted to say Chag Sameach to you. It's rather dark out at the moment, but of course very shortly you'll light your Chanukiot and light will be everywhere. The Chanukiah that I'm holding was handcrafted by my wife Orly's grandmother, Teresa Gottlieb, originally of Riga in Latvia. Thank God she left Latvia before the Nazis arrived, but the rest of her family was not as lucky. We have this as a memento of an extraordinary woman who left Latvia and came to what was then Palestine, later to become the State of Israel. I wish you all a Chag Sameach, and I hope that one day that instead of being on Zoom, I hate doing Zoom, we'll actually be able to do this together, all of us, in Eretz Israel, together, a tiyul of March of the Living. Chag Sameach, folks.